If you ever see an alien choose a human over her own people, do not ask what she is running from. Ask what she knows that everyone else does not. My name is Inspector Taryn Voss, and during 22 years of station security, I believed I had witnessed every kind of emergency the frontier could produce. Smugglers, pirates, desperate refugees, political fugitives, and frightened travelers all passed through Orion Market 7. Fear usually spread through a crowd like wildfire. That day, fear stopped the instant one young alien woman made a decision that none of us could understand. She burst through the center of the marketplace, weaving between cargo carts, fresh produce stands, maintenance drones, and hundreds of afternoon shoppers. Her pale blue skin reflected the overhead lights while strands of silver hair clung to her face. Around her neck, a narrow metallic collar pulsed with a bright crimson light that flashed once every second. I glanced toward the nearest public display and noticed another timer counting backward in perfect synchronization. 10 seconds remained. I had no idea what would happen when it reached 0, but I knew somebody wanted her before that moment arrived. She never slowed down. Instead, she scanned thousands of unfamiliar faces until her eyes suddenly locked onto a single man carrying 2 grocery bags near a fruit vendor. He looked completely ordinary. White skin, brown hair, gray eyes, about 6 feet tall, a weathered utility jacket. Nothing about him suggested danger, authority, or military experience. His name, although I did not know it yet, was Ryan Walker. The young woman reached him, grabbed the front of his jacket with trembling hands, and struggled to catch her breath. "Please," she whispered, "take me with you." Ryan did not react with surprise. He did not ask who she was. He did not ask why she had chosen him. He simply looked into her frightened eyes for one quiet moment before stepping half a pace forward, placing himself between her and the direction she had come from. It was the smallest movement imaginable, yet somehow it changed the entire atmosphere around us. 3 armored recovery agents emerged from the crowd. Only seconds later, they moved with the confidence of people who had never expected anyone to interfere. Shoppers immediately stepped aside, merchants abandoned conversations, and even delivery drones adjusted their routes to avoid the growing circle of silent spectators. The lead agent pointed directly toward the young woman. "She comes with us," he announced. Ryan glanced over his shoulder. "Do you want to leave with them?" he asked calmly. Her answer came without hesitation. "No." Ryan gave a single nod before facing the agents again. "Then she stays." The recovery team exchanged uncertain looks. They had expected arguments, panic, or negotiations. Instead, they found a human who sounded as though the decision had already been made. The lead agent slowly walked forward and reached toward Ryan's shoulder. "Move aside." Ryan never raised his voice. "That would be a mistake," he replied. The warning was spoken so quietly that several nearby shoppers leaned closer just to hear it. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. My scanner showed nothing unusual about the human standing before us. No combat implants. No enhanced armor. No concealed energy signature. Completely ordinary. Yet for reasons I still could not explain, every instinct I had developed over 2 decades warned me that the 3 armored agents were no longer the ones controlling what would happen next. The lead recovery agent ignored Ryan Walker's warning and extended his hand one final time, convinced that an ordinary human would eventually step aside. Ryan did not move. He simply shifted his weight by a few inches, allowing the agent's own momentum to carry him slightly off balance before the armored figure instinctively took a step back to regain his footing. It was such a small exchange that many people barely understood what had happened, yet the reaction across Orion Market 7 was immediate. The whispers stopped. The merchants stopped unpacking cargo. Even the children watching from behind their parents became completely silent. The recovery agents looked at one another with growing uncertainty because nothing about the encounter had followed the script they expected. Ryan remained exactly where he had started, shielding the frightened young woman without raising his voice or showing the slightest sign of urgency. I quietly activated another level of biometric scanning. Once again, every result came back exactly the same. Human. Male. No enhanced musculature. No military-grade implants. No concealed defensive equipment. Nothing explained the confidence standing in front of me. The crimson collar around the young woman's neck flashed again. 8 seconds remained on the synchronized countdown displayed across nearby information screens. Commander Drax Vorn finally stepped through the crowd, his dark uniform instantly commanding attention. Unlike the recovery agents, he did not speak immediately. Instead, he studied Ryan with careful interest, almost as though he recognized something the rest of us had missed. "You are making a costly decision," Drax said at last. Ryan answered with the same calm tone he had used from the beginning. "Only if she belongs to you." Drax shifted his attention toward the young woman. "Sayla, return voluntarily, and none of these civilians will be inconvenienced." She tightened her grip on Ryan's jacket, but never looked away from the commander. "I am not going back." Drax slowly nodded as though he had expected that answer. "Very well." Instead of advancing, he raised his wrist communicator. "Seal every public exit." Heavy security shutters immediately began descending across every corridor connected to the marketplace. Deep mechanical echoes rolled through the enormous station, while bright warning lights reflected across polished floors. Thousands of shoppers suddenly realized they could not leave. Fear spread rapidly, but Ryan never turned toward the closing exits. He looked only at Sayla. "Can you stay calm for another minute?" he asked. She swallowed nervously before answering. "I will try." Ryan gave a reassuring nod. "That is enough." His certainty seemed to calm her more effectively than any security officer could have. As the last shutter locked into place, I noticed something unusual on the surveillance feeds. Several maintenance workers who had been repairing lighting panels moments earlier quietly abandoned their equipment and began walking through the crowd. Their uniforms matched station regulations perfectly, yet every one of them moved with identical timing. They never looked at the frightened civilians. They never acknowledged one another. Their attention remained fixed on Ryan and Sayla. Before I could issue a station-wide alert, Ryan casually glanced toward the nearest reflective storefront window. He was not watching the people in front of him. He was watching their reflections behind him. A faint smile crossed his face. "Interesting," he murmured. Drax noticed the change immediately. "What did you see?" Ryan looked directly at him. "You brought more people than you admitted." For the first time since entering the marketplace, Commander Drax's expression changed. It was only for a heartbeat, but it was enough. Ryan had uncovered another layer of the operation before anyone else even realized there was one. The maintenance workers continued drifting through the marketplace with quiet precision, blending perfectly into the frightened crowd. If Ryan Walker had not noticed their reflections in the storefront glass, I doubt anyone would have questioned them. Their uniforms were correct. Their identification badges appeared authentic. Even their toolkits matched station regulations. Yet Ryan never looked directly at them. Instead, he calmly watched the polished floor beneath their feet. After several silent seconds, he spoke just loudly enough for Commander Drax Vorn to hear. "Your people practiced the uniforms," he said. "They forgot the boots." Several nearby shoppers instinctively looked downward. The maintenance workers wore brand new station boots without a single mark of dust or grease. Real maintenance crews spent entire shifts crawling through ventilation shafts and service tunnels. Their footwear never stayed clean. It was such a tiny detail that nobody else had noticed. Yet once Ryan pointed it out, the difference became impossible to ignore. Drax remained silent, but I saw the slightest tightening around his eyes. Ryan had uncovered another hidden layer without touching anyone or raising his voice. The disguised operatives quietly stopped walking. There was no reason to continue pretending. Around them, nervous civilians stepped aside, creating an even larger circle in the center of Orion Market 7. The atmosphere changed again. People were no longer afraid of the armed recovery team. They were waiting to see what the human would discover next. Sayla looked up at Ryan with growing disbelief. "How did you know?" she whispered. Ryan answered without taking his eyes off the disguised operatives. "People notice faces," he said softly. "Professionals notice habits." The words lingered in my mind because they explained everything I had witnessed since this confrontation began. Ryan was never reacting faster than everyone else. He was observing more than everyone else. One of the disguised operatives slowly placed his maintenance case on the floor. Instead of opening it, he quietly stepped backward toward the edge of the crowd. Ryan immediately turned toward me, knowing security cameras covered every angle of the marketplace. "Inspector," he called calmly, "do not watch the person moving away. Watch the case he left behind." I redirected every available camera toward the unattended equipment. The thermal scan revealed an active communication relay hidden beneath ordinary repair tools. It was not dangerous by itself, but it was transmitting encrypted signals toward another section of the station. Before I could isolate the signal, Ryan spoke again. They are not trying to capture Sayla anymore. Commander Drax finally broke his silence. What makes you believe that? Ryan looked directly at him. Because if she were still your priority, every operative would be facing her. He slowly pointed toward the maintenance case. Instead, they are protecting whatever that relay is connected to. Sayla suddenly inhaled sharply as another memory surfaced. The archive, she whispered. Not the public records. The original shipment records beneath the station. Ryan nodded once, as though he had been waiting for her to remember. That is why the countdown exists, he said. Everyone is supposed to watch the market while someone else reaches the evidence. Commander Drax remained perfectly still, but the silence itself became an answer. Ryan had solved the operation before it had reached its final stage. Then every information screen across Orion Market 7 flickered at exactly the same moment. The countdown disappeared and was replaced by a single system message that caused every security officer, including me, to stop breathing for one long second. Archive synchronization had been initiated ahead of schedule. Every screen inside Orion Market 7 changed at the same instant, replacing maps, advertisements, and docking schedules with a single notification that made the entire station feel smaller. Archive synchronization had already begun. The frightened whispers around the marketplace disappeared as thousands of travelers stared upward in confusion. Most believed the announcement explained what was happening. Ryan Walker quietly looked away from the screens. No, he said almost to himself. They want everyone looking in the wrong direction. Commander Drax Vorn watched him carefully, saying nothing. That silence told me more than any answer could have. Ryan had reached the same conclusion before anyone else on the station. He turned toward Sayla. When you escaped, what did you hear just before you reached the market? She closed her eyes, searching through memories she had desperately tried to forget. After several seconds, she opened them again. Someone said the original archive would never leave the station. Ryan nodded once. Exactly. She looked confused. But the synchronization. Ryan interrupted gently. Synchronization copies information. It does not move the original. I immediately pulled up the station engineering map across my security console. Ryan was right. The original archive was physically stored beneath Orion Market 7 inside a protected transit level connected to freight infrastructure that almost nobody used anymore. The public network only maintained mirrored copies. Everyone, including my own officers, had been focusing on the digital systems while the physical evidence remained somewhere below us. Ryan calmly looked toward the maintenance corridor beside the marketplace. That relay case was never transmitting files, he said. It was coordinating movement. Drax finally spoke again. You notice details that other people ignore. Ryan answered with a faint smile. People reveal their priorities long before they reveal their plans. At that moment, one of the disguised operatives quietly abandoned the maintenance case and disappeared into the crowd. Instead of following him, Ryan looked toward the opposite end of the marketplace where several cargo elevators stood behind rows of supply vendors. There, he said. I enlarged the surveillance image immediately. 2 cargo lifts had quietly changed from public service mode to restricted maintenance access only seconds earlier. No alarm had sounded because the authorization codes were legitimate. Ryan folded his arms while studying the display. Someone is already traveling down. Sayla suddenly stepped closer. The original records are below those elevators, she whispered. I remember hearing maintenance workers complain about the old freight tunnels. Ryan looked at her. Can you remember anything else? She took a slow breath. There is another entrance through the service corridors. It is longer, but almost nobody knows it exists. Ryan smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. Good. That means whoever planned this operation expects everyone to race toward the elevators. Without another word, he turned away from Commander Drax and walked calmly toward the maintenance passage instead. The recovery agents instinctively shifted to intercept him, but Ryan never altered his pace. He simply chose a parallel corridor that none of them had been watching because they had assumed the elevators were the only practical route. Drax watched the human disappear into the service tunnel before quietly closing his eyes for a brief moment. It was not frustration I saw on his face. It was reluctant respect. He had built an operation around predicting everyone else's decisions. Ryan had defeated that strategy by refusing to make the obvious choice. As I redirected every available security camera toward the forgotten maintenance network beneath the station, one inactive sensor unexpectedly came online by itself and revealed a shadow standing deep inside the tunnel, waiting in complete silence for Ryan to arrive. The forgotten maintenance corridor beneath Orion Market 7 was quieter than any place I had ever monitored. The distant sounds of the crowded marketplace faded behind reinforced walls until only the steady hum of ventilation systems remained. Ryan Walker never hurried. Even after discovering that someone had been waiting ahead, he continued at the same measured pace, studying every junction, every maintenance panel, and every security light along the tunnel. Watching through the restored surveillance cameras, I realized he was not searching for people anymore. He was searching for patterns. 50 feet ahead, the lone figure standing in the shadows finally stepped into the emergency lighting. The stranger wore heavy, gray tactical armor with no visible insignia, no rank markings, and no identifying symbols. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, broad enough to block the entire corridor, yet he never reached for a weapon or made an aggressive move. Instead, he quietly folded his hands behind his back as though waiting for an expected guest. Ryan stopped several feet away. Neither man spoke for a long moment. Finally, the armored stranger broke the silence. Most people would have taken the cargo elevators. Ryan nodded once. That is why I did not. The giant gave a faint smile that disappeared almost immediately. You solved the first test. Ryan looked past him instead of at him. No. I noticed the elevators were designed to delay anyone using them. The stranger slowly turned his head, following Ryan's gaze toward the service tunnel continuing beyond his position. For only a fraction of a second, his attention shifted away. Ryan had not tricked him with speed. He had redirected his focus. Before the armored figure fully understood what had happened, Ryan calmly walked around him through the narrow maintenance clearance beside the wall. The giant never attempted to stop him. He simply watched the human continue down the corridor before quietly saying, "You trusted that I would not interfere." Ryan answered without slowing down. "No, I trusted that you were guarding something more important than me." Those words echoed through the empty tunnel. Even from the security control room, I could feel the weight of that realization. Ryan had once again defeated an obstacle without creating a confrontation. The armored guardian remained exactly where he stood because Ryan had correctly identified his true assignment. He was protecting the route behind him, not chasing anyone ahead of him. Meanwhile, back inside the marketplace, something equally unexpected began unfolding. The frightened merchants who had hidden behind their stalls slowly stepped forward. Without being asked, they started helping station security organize safe routes for trapped families. Cargo handlers rolled heavy storage containers into orderly barriers. Shop owners offered secure rooms for children and elderly travelers. Even visitors from worlds that rarely trusted one another began working side by side. Sayla watched everything with growing disbelief. "They are helping," she whispered. I looked at her. "Because of the human?" She slowly nodded. "No, because he stayed calm first." Her answer lingered in my thoughts. Courage, I realized, was spreading through the station faster than fear ever had. Deep beneath the marketplace, Ryan reached another sealed maintenance junction where a faded transit map still clung to the wall. He studied it for only a few seconds before tracing one route with his finger. "There," he said quietly. "The archive is not beneath the freight terminal." I enlarged every engineering blueprint available. He was right again. Hidden behind the abandoned transit platform was an older service chamber that no longer appeared on the public station maps. Whoever designed the operation had erased it from modern records, but forgotten one aging maintenance diagram still bolted to the wall. Ryan smiled faintly as another concealed door slowly unlocked somewhere ahead, proving he had once again discovered the path that everyone else had overlooked. The concealed doorway slid open without a sound, revealing an older section of Orion Market 7 that had clearly been forgotten by almost everyone except the people who had designed today's operation. Dust covered the floor. Emergency lights glowed with faded amber colors instead of the modern white illumination used throughout the station. Ryan Walker stepped through the entrance without hesitation, but he did not continue immediately. He stopped beside the doorway and quietly examined the wall. Most people would have focused on what lay ahead. Ryan focused on what had been left behind. His fingers brushed across a row of faded inspection plates before stopping on one that had been polished more recently than the others. "Someone opened this door not long ago," he said softly. "Through the security cameras, I enlarged the image." He was right. One inspection plate showed tiny scratches around its fasteners while every surrounding panel had collected years of dust. Ryan had discovered another clue simply because one small detail did not match the rest of the corridor. He continued forward at the same steady pace until the passage opened into an abandoned service chamber lined with obsolete transit equipment. The room appeared empty, yet Ryan did not walk through the center. Instead, he remained close to the left wall, studying the reflections in the dark observation windows overlooking inactive cargo rails. A faint movement appeared in the glass before it appeared anywhere else. Ryan smiled almost imperceptibly. "You have been waiting a long time," he said. A quiet voice answered from somewhere beyond the room. "Long enough to know you would not use the elevators." The speaker finally stepped into view wearing a simple gray field uniform without insignia. Unlike Commander Drax Vorn or the recovery teams, this individual carried no visible authority. His calm posture suggested confidence rather than confrontation. Ryan studied him for a moment. "You are not Black Talon," he observed. "No," the stranger replied. "Neither are you." I immediately searched every available security record. The facial scan returned nothing. The station had no record that this individual had ever entered Orion Market 7. Ryan folded his arms. "You accelerated the synchronization." The stranger nodded. "I wanted to see whether you would continue chasing the timer or begin chasing the reason behind it." Ryan answered without hesitation. "People build distractions around what they fear losing." The stranger smiled for the first time. "Exactly." Before I could understand the conversation, Sayla's voice came through the emergency communication channel from the marketplace above. "Ryan," she said urgently, "I remember another detail." Ryan immediately activated his communicator. "Go ahead. The original archive is protected by a maintenance override. Black Talon never controlled it directly. They only controlled access to it." Ryan looked toward the stranger. "That is why you stayed hidden." The man gave a slight nod. Someone had to make certain the override reached the right person. He stepped aside, revealing a narrow engineering console built into the rear wall of the chamber. It looked decades older than the rest of the station. Ryan approached the console, but stopped before touching it. Instead, he carefully examined the faded engineering labels surrounding the controls. "There are two override sequences," he said quietly. "One preserves the archive. The other silently transfers ownership." The stranger looked genuinely surprised. "How did you know?" Ryan rested one hand lightly against the console. "Because engineers always leave themselves a recovery option, but administrators always ask for a shortcut. Both systems are usually installed together." The stranger lowered his head with quiet respect. At that exact moment, every emergency light inside the chamber shifted from amber to bright white, and a calm computerized voice echoed through the forgotten corridor. Authorized executive access had just been requested from somewhere else inside the station, meaning Commander Drax had reached the final stage of his plan at exactly the same moment Ryan uncovered the only way to stop it. The calm computerized voice echoed through the forgotten engineering chamber for only a few seconds before fading into silence, but its message changed everything. Executive authorization had already been accepted somewhere else inside Orion Market 7. Ryan Walker did not react with panic. He quietly looked at the aging maintenance console, then at the stranger standing beside it, before finally turning toward the corridor leading deeper beneath the station. "He is not trying to erase the archive anymore," Ryan said. "He is trying to become its owner." The stranger gave a slow nod. "Ownership grants the authority to classify every record permanently." I immediately searched the station regulations from the security control room. Ryan was correct. If Commander Drax Vorn completed the transfer before anyone interrupted the process, every original document would remain intact yet become legally inaccessible to every investigator in the galaxy. The evidence would still exist, but no court could ever examine it. It was a cleaner solution than destruction and far more difficult to challenge. Ryan rested one hand lightly on the maintenance console but made no attempt to activate it. Instead, he quietly examined the engineering diagram etched into the metal surface. His eyes paused at one narrow service line running beneath the archive chamber. This console is not connected directly to the archive, he observed. It is connected to the environmental systems surrounding it. The stranger looked genuinely surprised. Very few people noticed that. Ryan smiled faintly. Engineers always protect the room before they protect the equipment inside it. He pressed one small diagnostic switch instead of the larger override controls. The aging display slowly illuminated, revealing a maintenance status report rather than a security interface. Air circulation, temperature stabilization, power routing, pressure control. Every surrounding support system appeared before the archive itself. Ryan quietly reviewed each line until one indicator caught his attention. There, he said. The archive cannot complete an ownership transfer unless the environmental integrity remains certified. I immediately understood his reasoning. If the chamber entered maintenance mode, every administrative process would automatically pause until engineers confirmed the area was stable again. Ryan had found another solution without disabling a single security system. Meanwhile, hundreds of feet above us, Sela remained under the protection of station officers and volunteers who had transformed the marketplace into an organized shelter instead of a chaotic evacuation. Through the emergency communication channel, her voice reached the engineering chamber. Ryan, I remember one more thing. He answered immediately. Go ahead. The executive terminal is not inside the archive. It overlooks it through an observation gallery. Ryan looked toward the old engineering map mounted beside the console. His finger traced a narrow maintenance passage running parallel to the archive chamber before stopping at a forgotten observation corridor that no longer appeared on public station diagrams. That is where Drax is standing now, he said quietly. The stranger folded his arms. If you use the main corridor, you will arrive too late. Ryan shook his head. I was never planning to use the main corridor. He closed the maintenance panel, leaving every override untouched, and calmly walked toward the narrow service passage hidden behind the aging machinery. Watching through the last functioning surveillance camera, I realized he had once again ignored the obvious route in favor of the forgotten one. Commander Drax had spent the entire operation predicting what everyone else would choose. Ryan kept winning because he never competed inside those expectations. As he disappeared into the dimly lit observation passage, the first transparent window overlooking the archive chamber came into view, and through the reinforced glass Ryan quietly spotted Commander Drax already waiting beside the executive terminal, completely unaware that the human had reached the room from a direction nobody had considered possible. Ryan Walker remained perfectly still behind the reinforced observation window, watching Commander Drax Vorn from an angle the commander clearly believed was impossible. The executive terminal illuminated the otherwise dark archive chamber with a pale blue glow, reflecting across rows of sealed storage units that contained decades of original records. Drax stood alone beside the terminal, calmly reviewing authorization prompts as though every obstacle had already been removed. Ryan did not focus on the commander. He studied the room itself. His eyes followed the ceiling-mounted ventilation system, the maintenance access panels beneath the observation gallery, and the small status indicators surrounding the executive terminal. After several quiet seconds, he smiled almost imperceptibly. He is still waiting, Ryan whispered. Through the security network, I immediately checked every available camera. Nothing appeared unusual. Commander Drax was alone. The archive remained untouched. The authorization countdown continued moving toward completion. Waiting for what? I asked through the emergency communication channel. Ryan answered without taking his eyes off the chamber. Confirmation. The single word changed everything. Drax had not completed the transfer because he still expected one final condition before pressing the last command. Ryan slowly stepped away from the observation glass and walked toward a maintenance cabinet hidden along the service corridor. It looked forgotten, covered with years of dust and faded inspection labels. Instead of forcing it open, Ryan gently brushed away the dust until one nearly invisible engineering symbol appeared beneath the grime. There you are, he said quietly. He opened the cabinet and revealed a compact environmental monitoring panel connected to the archive chamber. No security codes, no classified markings, only routine engineering controls that most administrators would never notice. Ryan carefully reviewed the display before selecting a diagnostic option rather than any operational command. Inside the archive chamber, The lighting shifted slightly as a maintenance verification cycle quietly activated. Commander Drax immediately looked toward the ceiling. His confident expression disappeared for the first time that day. He checked the executive terminal again. The authorization countdown had stopped. Not canceled. Simply paused. Ryan had not challenged the security system. He had reminded it to protect itself first. I watched every status update appear across my console with growing disbelief. Archive ownership transfers required uninterrupted environmental certification by station engineering protocols. The maintenance verification Ryan activated temporarily suspended every administrative process without damaging a single file. It was an elegant solution hiding inside ordinary maintenance procedures. Drax looked around the chamber, searching for the cause of the interruption, never imagining the answer was standing quietly behind the observation wall. Ryan spoke calmly into his communicator. "Inspector, confirm engineering maintenance status across the archive level." I immediately transmitted the request. Seconds later, the station computer returned exactly what Ryan expected. Preventive maintenance inspection in progress. Administrative functions temporarily unavailable. The stranger from the forgotten engineering chamber quietly laughed through the open communication channel. "You solved it without touching the archive." Ryan answered simply. The safest way to protect something important is to avoid becoming part of the problem. Above us, Sayla listened in complete silence before softly asking, "Is it over?" Ryan looked once more through the observation glass at Commander Drax, who now stood completely still beside a terminal that refused every executive request. "Not yet," Ryan replied. He still believes there is another move left. As if responding to those words, a hidden panel at the far end of the archive chamber slowly opened, revealing one final secure passage that had never appeared on any station blueprint. Commander Drax turned toward it with obvious relief, but Ryan's calm expression never changed. He had already been watching that doorway several seconds before it opened. The hidden passage at the far end of the archive chamber opened slowly, revealing not another squad of operatives or another layer of security, but a single elderly station administrator carrying a worn authorization tablet with both hands. Commander Drax Vorn immediately straightened, confident that the final step of his plan had finally arrived. Ryan Walker remained silent behind the observation gallery, watching the administrator instead of the commander. After only a few seconds, he quietly spoke into the communication channel. "He is nervous." I enlarged the camera feed until every movement became visible. Ryan was right again. The administrator was not looking at Commander Drax. His eyes repeatedly drifted toward the original archive itself, then toward the environmental status lights surrounding the chamber. He was checking the room before acknowledging the commander. Ryan calmly continued. "He knows the maintenance verification has priority." The administrator reached the executive terminal and attempted to begin the ownership authorization, but the display refused the request with the same message that had already frozen every administrative command. Environmental certification remained in progress. Commander Drax's confident expression slowly faded. For the first time since this operation began, he had no immediate answer. Ryan finally stepped into view through the observation entrance, his footsteps echoing softly across the quiet chamber. Neither he nor Drax raised a weapon. Neither made a threatening move. Ryan simply stopped several feet away and looked at the administrator. "You have protected these records for a long time," he said calmly. The administrator nodded. "Long enough to remember why they were sealed in the first place." Ryan gave a respectful smile. "Then you also know they were never meant to belong to one person." Silence filled the chamber. The administrator slowly lowered the authorization tablet without another word. That single decision ended everything Commander Drax had spent months preparing. There was no dramatic confrontation, no desperate escape, only the quiet realization that the final authority in the room had chosen principle instead of convenience. Moments later, the station computer announced that the maintenance verification had been completed successfully. Instead of transferring ownership, the archive automatically restored its original protected status under independent oversight. Every authentic shipment record remained preserved exactly as it had always been, available for lawful review and impossible for any individual to control alone. Throughout Orion Market 7, emergency restrictions quietly disappeared. Marketplace doors reopened. Information displays returned to normal schedules. Families left their temporary shelters. Merchants resumed their conversations. Fear faded almost as quickly as it had arrived. Sayla finally reached the archive level accompanied by station security. She stopped in front of Ryan, her violet eyes filled with disbelief rather than fear. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Ryan smiled gently. "I told you that if you wanted to leave with them, it would be your choice. If you did not, that would also be your choice." She looked around the chamber before asking the question that had been growing inside her since they first met. "Who are you?" Ryan thought quietly for a moment before answering. "Just someone who pays attention. As Inspector Taryn Voss, I had spent my entire career believing that strength came from authority, technology, and superior numbers. One ordinary human quietly dismantled that belief without raising his voice, without seeking recognition, and without treating anyone as an enemy. He simply observed what everyone else ignored until the truth became impossible to hide." Long after Ryan Walker disappeared into the departing crowd and Orion Market 7 returned to its ordinary rhythm, one thought remained with me above every official report I ever filed. We had always believed humans survived because they were resilient. That day I finally understood the truth. They endured because they noticed what the rest of us never even thought to see, and that made them far more dangerous and far more remarkable than anyone in our galaxy had ever imagined.